Hi, welcome to the Black TV Show podcast. I'm your host, Miriam. I just want to start off and say I'm a little nervous today as this is my first podcast ever. I love podcasts. I listen to so many podcasts every day about talking about reality shows, just news in general. And, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I work in film and television. I work as a crew member, and I just currently finished off working on a CBC show, which is a Canadian Broadcast Corporation. And now that it's back to how bad the pandemic has been, we're in lockdown right now. So I have a lot of time to myself. So I decided I should create a podcast to talk about my favorite thing, which is Black TV shows. Anyone that knows me personally knows how obsessed I am, how much I'll talk to you about it. Even people I work with in the workforce, I tell them how much I would love to work on Black content, with Black films and stuff. And so I was like, you know what? Let's make a podcast and talk about my favorite subject. And that's why I created this podcast. I hope to one day create my own Black TV show, preferably a Black sitcom. But I know sitcoms are kind of dying down right now, which is pretty sad because that's what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about a lot of Black sitcoms from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. That's like, I feel like the best era in terms of television for me in particular. And we're going to start off with the Cosby Show. It is my favorite show of all time. Some people might have issues with that just because of what has happened in the last decade with Mr. Cosby. With this podcast, we're going to be talking about strictly the show. We might talk about personal stuff behind the scenes of the show, but I'm not interested in talking about what has happened in the last decade. This show itself is legendary. It's like I could always go back to watching it, watch reruns all the time, and learn lots of lessons from the show. And so that's the reason why we're starting off this show. What I'm planning to do is to watch an episode and then talk about that episode on the podcast. And we're going to go through starting with season 1 and keep going all the way to season 8. I might have some bonus episodes from other shows. And then we'll be talking about other shows in the future. So we're going to start off with how the Cosby Show itself was created. In the early 80s, Cosby was trying to pitch the show to networks. And back then there was no Netflix, Amazon, all this stuff. And, oh, by the way, you can watch this show on Amazon Prime. And so the only networks at the time was, CBC, NBC, and ABC. And all three networks basically shut him down. The script that they had originally was Cliff being the plumber and Claire being the housewife. But Mrs. Cosby, which is Bill Cosby's wife in real life, said that why don't you make the husband and wife professionals. So they changed it to Cliff being a doctor and Claire being a housewife. One day, Bill Cosby was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and Brandon Turnikoff from he was the president of NBC at the time. And you know what's crazy? That name became so familiar to me because he's been on other shows as like guest appearance. Like the one that I remember the most is him being on Saved by the Bell. I forgot what he was trying to talk about on there, but I remember that there was an episode where he came on and talked with the cast. So he loved what Bill Cosby was talking about in his comedy set. He was talking about how to get kids out of your house, basically. And so he decided to create the show. And he just did it just, because he thought it was funny. But he didn't realize that the show would become the #1 show on NBC for 5 straight years, and it really revived the network of NBC. See, this is what happens. If you put black people on television, we'll make you better. That's just how it is in history. It's just I hated that the fact that in the 2010s to like now, or to I guess 2018, there wasn't many black shows. Like, it kind of died down after the early 2000s, and it just. But when you hear these like stats of what happened in the 80s and 90s with black TV shows, I don't understand why we don't have more of them. When Mr. Cosby originally pitched the show to all these networks, they all thought, white America would not want to watch a show about a black family, the ins and outs of a family life. But they were wrong. So when they were doing casting, Rudy, which is played by Keisha Knight Pulliam, was originally supposed to be a boy, but they couldn't find any girls that age that would be perfect for that role. So they end up changing the role to being a girl, and that's how Keisha was able to get that role. And apparently at the time she couldn't even read, like, when she started. So it's amazing how good she was at the time when originally filming the show, and being able to start reading while being on a primetime show. And so we're gonna get into the first episode, which is season 1, episode 1, which is the pilot presentation. So it's the pilot. It was originally filmed in May of 1984, and it was aired September 20th, 1984. So basically, this show was out 11 years before I was born. So this is a pretty old show, but it always resonates with me, This is actually probably one of the shows, one of the episodes that is the most notable of a lot of the episodes of this show, due to what we're going to be talking about with Theo and the economic lesson that he gets from Cliff. In 1996, TV Guide actually said that this episode was 100 most memorable moments in TV history, ranking as number 31. The premise of the Cosby Show is basically the parents trying to raise their 5 children, but in the pilot itself, they say that they have 4 children. So they changed the script after the pilot. So they're raising 5 kids, and the reason why Sandra, which is the oldest kid, got added onto the show afterwards was to show the end product of raising a child. But during the show, Claire is the one usually running the household. She's the boss. She's just a queen, just as herself. Back then you would think like the man run the household, and control, but no. Claire has all. She has, just with her stare, like Felicia embodied Claire. Some of the themes of the show is the parents are basically overachievers. The fact that you have a parent that's a doctor and a lawyer, like how do you beat that? Like, it's hard. Like, I feel for the kids, because like when you're in school and you don't do well and your parents are very successful, you just, how do you deal with that, and then one of the main, I would say, gags of the show is basically trying to get their kids out of the house. So we'll start seeing that as we go along with the season. the show also didn't really like hit hard about race. What has happened in 2020 with the uprising of the riots of what happened with George Floyd. You don't you didn't see much examples of racism on the Cosby Show as you would see on A Different World, which is the spin-off show of the Cosby Show, and on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So that's, I think, the one downside of the Cosby Show, but it's a great show overall to watch as a family. Any age can watch the show. And so starting with this pilot episode, the intro is not, as we go, it's gonna be hard for me to not say some spoilers. I'm sorry. So I apologize if I say any spoilers. The first season intro is very different compared to all the other intros, and it's actually one of my least favorite intros, which is them getting off a van to go to Central Park to play sports and have a picnic. And so yeah, and if you notice, Felicia, her last name on there is like Iris. I can't pronounce it, but it's something Allen, which makes sense because she's related to Debbie Allen. It actually changes in the second season when she gets married. So the guest stars on the show, I didn't recognize any of them. I think a lot of them kind of stopped acting after the 80s. So most of these shows go through two different storylines, so storyline A and storyline B. Sometimes I might just talk about the one storyline because sometimes it's so intermingled, but this episode is very separate in terms of their storylines. So I'm going to start with storyline A, which is basically talking about the economic lesson that Theo gets from Cliff. So we start off in the kitchen of the kids dancing in the kitchen, and I just noticed in the kitchen it looks a bit different. The island is like connected in the kitchen, but when you look at later episodes, the island is cut basically, and you can walk through it. And then so they're all dancing, and Vanessa wants a dog, and Theo calls Vanessa a dog. Basically, sibling. It's the normal way the siblings act with each other. And then Claire turns off the music, but then Cliff comes in and he puts back the radio on and puts some jazz. And I decided actually for this podcast, because we're starting with the Cosby Show, I decided to put jazz as my intro. So I'm using Duke Ellington in the Sentimental Mood, which actually, the first time hearing that song, I heard it on the Cosby Show. So when we get to the episode that they play that song, I'm going to be like, whoa, this is the first time I heard the song. So that's why my intro is jazz. And so, which you can tell the generation gap basically with that, because the kids had like hip hop on, but Cliff was like, no, like he was more into jazz. And that's another theme in the show. You see the different genre of music. Music is a big thing on the Cosby Show. You see how much the kids love hip hop, because that was back then, that was the rise of hip hop. So later on, they were at the dining room set, which is like a completely different looking set than they will see in future episodes. Basically, in this pilot episode, it seems like that they just put like a whole bunch of sets together, and then they were like, let's see if this gets greenlit, and then they got greenlit, and then they changed all the sets. So I'm trying to think, do I like this set compared to the future ones? I don't know, this one's a little hard to tell. It's nice that it's rounded, because in future seasons it's like a straight table. So I don't know. I don't have much opinion about that. And so, the four kids are there, and, Vanessa and Theo is fighting like usual. Claire gives a great speech. The fact that Cliff and Claire gives all of their resources to make sure that the kids can be the best that they can and get all the can't speak today, advantages in the world, and yet Theo keeps getting a D on his report card. And the way that Claire talks, it's just like...
Trouble as it is, young man, bringing home that report card of yours. Now, your father and I have given you every advantage in this world, and what do you do?
Well, it's like I told you.
Don't answer me when I'm asking you questions. Keep your mouth shut. You think I'm talking just to hear myself talk? Answer me.
Now?
Save those smart mouth answers for your father, because I have washed my hands of this entire matter. Do you understand?
Right. No problem.
I get mesmerized when Felicia talks, even like in real life when she talks, just like how gracefully she says it, but like how stern it is. And so we get to the living room set, which this set I don't like. The living room in this one it seems like it's a small house based on this compared to what we're going to see in the next episode, how bigger the living room set is. It makes it seem like a much bigger house. So I definitely don't like this living room set. And, so Cliff comes home from work, and Claire questions Cliff, saying, "Why do we have 4 children?"
Why do we have 4 children?
Because we did not want 5.
Which doesn't make sense because I believe it's in episode 10, Sandra comes in, so they actually have 5 children, so that sentence doesn't really, the continuity of that question does not make sense with the show. Cliff's answer is like, because we didn't want 5, which is so false. Claire gives that look as, giving that warning sign to Cliff that Theo's in trouble. And Cliff wants to eat, but Claire's like, no, you cannot eat until you tell our son that he needs to work better to get better grades. And there was a bat on the side of the stairs, and he goes, grabs it, and Claire's like, no. And he's like, I'm just kidding. Cliff is like, I'm just kidding. So Cliff goes into Theo's room, and his room is a mess, which is another theme that you'll see throughout the show, that Theo's room is always the messiest room in the house. My room is always the messiest. I have clothes always on the ground. That's just how my life is, so I understand Theo's life, just the stresses of life. My room has always been like that, even when I was in high school. Cliff talks to Theo.
Your mother asked me to come up here and kill you.
Hey, I know.
You know what?
What you gonna say? And it's under control. So, no
problem. Right. How do you expect to get into college with grades like this?
No problem.
Huh?
See, I'm not going to college.
Damn right.
I am gonna get through high school and then get a job like regular people.
Regular people?
Yeah, who work in the gas station, drive a bus, something like that.
So what you're saying is your mother and I shouldn't care if you get D's because you don't need good grades to be regular people.
Right.
And Theo says that he doesn't want to go to college. He just wants to work as a regular person, in the gas station, or drive a bus. And Cliff is like, what? Like, because I guess in his mind, he is going to college, and so Cliff decides to teach him a lesson by using Monopoly money. This is the most iconic scene from the show, which is crazy to me because this is the pilot. Usually a lot of iconic scenes from television shows are not taken from the pilot because the pilot usually is not the greatest. But the fact that this is like the most iconic, that like most people that have seen this show always talks about this one particular scene about the economic lesson that Cliff gives Theo. So basically, Cliff says,
suppose you graduate from high school. Let's say you just slide by. All right, now you got to find a job. Now, what kind of salary do you expect for a regular person?
$250 a week.
$250 a week?
Yeah.
Sit down. I'm going to give you $300 a week. Yes, indeed. $300 a week, $1,200 a month. All right?
Great, I'll take it.
Yes, you will. And I will take $350 for taxes.
Whoa.
Huh? Yeah. Now, because see, the government comes for the regular people first. Now, how much does that leave you with?
$850.
All right. Now, you've got to have an apartment because you are not going to live here. An apartment in Manhattan will run you at least $400 a month.
I'll live in New Jersey.
You live in New Jersey, you've got to have a car.
I'll ride a motorbike.
You need a helmet. Figure $100 a month for clothes and shoes.
Figure 200. I want to look good.
Okay, so what does that leave you with?
$200. So, no problem.
There is a problem. You haven't eaten yet.
I can get by on bologna and cereal. So, I got everything I need, plus $200 left for the month.
You plan to have a girlfriend?
For sure.
Regular people.
Theo gets $300 a week from work, which is $1,200 a month. And then Theo's happy. And then Cliff takes $350 for taxes because, you know, the government goes for the regular people first. And Theo's like, whoa, what? Like, and I was like that the same when I first started, especially when I started in the film industry, because I made more money when I started working in the film industry. And, you know, I am a regular person, and I realized how much, when I got my first paycheck and see, you know, how much money went towards taxes, I'm like, damn, like, it's a lot, you know? So I understand where Theo's coming with this. And then Cliff says Theo has to pay $400 in rent and $100 in clothes and shoes, but Theo's like, I want to look good, so it'll be $200 a month for clothes and shoes. So then he's left with $200, and then Cliff is like, are you planning to have a girlfriend? And Theo's like, for sure. And he ends up with $0. And Cliff shows him with that empty hand saying, oh, so this is what a regular person is, having $0 a month. And so then Theo goes and talks to, Theo basically speaks his mind. And just listen.
Thought about what you said, and I see your point.
Thank you.
But I have a point, too.
Make your point.
You're a doctor and Mom's a lawyer. And you're both successful and everything, and that's great. But maybe I was born to be a regular person and have a regular life. If you weren't a doctor, I wouldn't love you less because you're my dad. And so, instead of acting disappointed because I'm not like you, maybe you can just accept who I am and love me anyway because I'm your son.
He is, I would say the same thing, because I was just like, why can't you treat me as, you know, like because the anger of someone scared me, you know, and I am trying my best, and I understand what Theo's going through. Like, I am trying my best to get a good grade. And so, but then instead of, you know, because in most shows, usually, and even I remember seeing like an interview that Malcolm had talked about the scene, and he's like, you know, in most shows, you would see the dad and son hugging, and then the show would just end. No, instead, this is what Cliff says.
Theo, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. No wonder you get D's and everything. Now, you are afraid to try because you're afraid that your brain is going to explode and it's going to ooze out of your ears. Now, I'm telling you, you are going to try as hard as you can. And you're going to do it because I said so. I am your father. I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out. Now, son, come here. Come here. Now, listen to me. I just want you to do the best you can. That's all.
I'll try, Dad.
Yeah.
I really will.
All right. I love you.
Yeah, Dad.
Huh?
I know.
Yeah. And maybe your mother loves you too.
He basically goes off on Theo. And then finally, you know, Cliff says he just wants his son to do the best he can, and knows how much he loves him, which is the nicest way to end it off, at least. You know, to be angry is not the best way to end a conversation, so it was great that he says that. And then Cliff goes back to the kitchen to finally eat, because, you know, he's hungry, because, you know, he's been, you know, working all day, you know, 18 hours. Cliff told him that he wants him to do the best that he can. Cliff says, you know, Theo's lazy, but he's saying, so basically what Cliff is saying is Theo wants to be a regular person, but the problem is Theo is lazy, and if the regular people knew that he's using their name, then they're going to go after him, which is true, because I feel like, you know, people working at a gas station or driving a bus, they work long hours, or they could be working multiple jobs just to make ends meet, and so they're technically the hard working people that do all this stuff. So, you know, Theo can't really use that term regular person or regular people because he's just lazy, which, you know, I'm in the same boat. I feel like I really relate with Theo here, you know. So we end off with that storyline. So storyline B is kind of intermingled with the other siblings. This is in between the conversation that Cliff and Theo had, where Vanessa and Rudy get kicked out of the shower because Denise needed to use the washroom, and Rudy was, I guess, taking a shower, and she had soap up in her head, and Vanessa's telling Cliff, saying, you know, the soaps can go into her eyes and Rudy can be blinded for life. And then she's like, and if she does, can we have a dog? And I'm like, how rude are you? Like, really? And so, by the way, I am an only child, so I don't understand the life of, you know, having a sibling. But I do understand that, you know, most siblings, a lot of them do fight. So I understand, and, you know, would rather have a dog than to have their sibling. But for me, I would rather have a extra sibling, though. The only child life is kind of boring, so I'd rather be fighting with a sibling than to be an only child. And then when I was watching this, I noticed the bathroom door is on the left side of this episode, but when you see in future episodes, it's on the right side, and it's like further back. So another set change. Like all the sets in this episode all are going to change in the future episodes. And so then Denise gets out of the wash, so first of all, Vanessa and Rudy go to the parents' bathroom to clean off, and Denise gets out because she's going on a date. It's Friday night, and Cliff tells her to change her pants, and so Cliff goes downstairs to check to talk to Claire about why Denise is basically going on a date and who is she going with, and Cliff basically says, how ugly is he? And in a future episode, I believe the name of the episode is how ugly is he, so I'm wondering if they took it from this episode. The guy is standing right there. It's like, imagine if someone said that, you're like in the room and someone says, how ugly are you, or is that person? Like, that seems very embarrassing, and be like I kind of want to get out of this house. And so the guy is there, and so then they talk, and Cliff kind of realized that the guy has some experience in life, and he has a one earring on his ear, which I guess back then must have been not trending. But nowadays I feel like I see a lot of guys with earrings, and sometimes even like 2 earrings. So that part is a little outdated compared to now. And so, yeah, we learned that the guy has some experience because he's been in the military, and he's 2 years behind Denise in schooling. So clearly he must have like left school to go to the military. And then Claire comes back from because Claire went upstairs to check on the kids, came back and she's angry and starts speaking Spanish, which is kind of cool to see that. I do wish they used a lot more of that in the show. I think it kind of died out. Like she spoke some Spanish in some of these episodes, but I think after the 3rd season she kind of stopped speaking Spanish. So it's kind of sad, because it could really show the New York, is very multicultural, diverse place. So it would have been great. And so Claire, and by the way, the setting of the show is in, I believe, Brooklyn, New York. Probably in next episode I'll say which they always say the actual street name, and to be honest, I've actually been to the exterior of the house in real life in New York. So when I went to New York, I made sure to go see it. And when I went to see it, it was under construction, so it was kind of like not what I saw in the show, but it was cool to see where it was. Of course, the street that I went to is a different name than the street that they say in the show. I think it's like 10 Stigwood Avenue, I believe they said, but I'm going to clarify in the next episode. So it was cool to actually see it when I went to New York. And so then so that ends with the guy, and Cliff goes back upstairs to see Denise, and Denise has like makeup only on one side of her face, and she changed to a different outfit that was more, I guess, classier. And which is weird to have like so much makeup on one side. For me in particular, I'm not much of a makeup person, but it was kind of nice, cool, colorful, and I feel like it's very 80s retro kind of thing. And it was very Denise, because Denise's style in the show is very different than all the other kids. She's kind of, I guess, the outlier. She likes to do her own thing, which I like. She's her own stuff, and I feel like Lisa Bonet, who plays Denise, that's her style too in a way. So it was kind of cool to see that. And so then we get to later in the evening. Cliff and Claire are in the bedroom. Yet again, the bedroom set changes in the future episodes. It's just crazy to me how much they change the set. And so they're laying there, and or before they lay there, Claire is like, oh, she looks in the mirror and she's like, I was such a beautiful woman before having children, but I'm hoping, when the children leave, I will be beautiful again. Which, excuse me, Claire is so beautiful. She is like a model looking, just so amazingly beautiful. So I don't know what she's saying. I don't know what she's talking about. And then they're in the bed, and Claire is, so I guess Cliff is kissing her, and Claire is like, this is how we end up having the children, because, she's so done with children. And then there's a knock on their door, the kids walk in on them, and Cliff is like, you're supposed to knock and say, who is it? So they go back out, the kids, Rudy and Vanessa, go back outside, and they knock, and then Cliff is like, who is it? And they're like, who is it? Like, I don't know, it was funny. The way I say it is not as funny or as they say it. They're professionals, And Vanessa comes in and tells, Rudy thinks there's a wolfman growling in her closet. And, Cliff's like, there isn't a wolfman. And then they go back and forth. Rudy's like, yeah, there was. Yeah. And so then finally, they were like, do you want they ask the Vanessa and Rudy if they want to sleep with the parents for the night. They're like, yes. And so the show ends with that. And then there's a storyline C, which just doesn't really make it. Just, I don't know. This is probably the least part of the episode that I liked. That didn't really go along with the episode, I think, which was when we get to the hospital set, which we don't see this set in particular again in future episodes, but we do end up in the hospital at some point in the series. And so it's, Cliff, calming down a father, which was kind of weird because I thought usually a nurse would deal with that. So it's a little weird that Cliff would be taking care of that. And basically telling the father, don't worry, this is normal, your wife is in labor and in lots of pain. Even my wife, when she was in pain, she lied to my parents, or she lied to the doctor and saying, his parents never got married. So that's basically it. So this part didn't really make sense to me with the storyline, but that's just my opinion. So we reached the end of the episode of the season 1, episode 1 pilot presentation. And I feel like the lesson of this episode is, in order to be a regular people or person, you have to be educated. I feel like that's what the message of the episode is. It doesn't necessarily mean be educated by going to college, but in terms of the kids, being educated to graduate high school, and then get educated in any field that you have to be educated in order to do what you want to do with your life and with your dreams. So as I said, not necessarily college or university. So I feel like that is the lesson of this episode. And my plan is for each episode to do a hashtag. And I would say the hashtag is regular people. Because that's all we were talking about with Cliff and Theo. I hope you guys I hope you enjoy the show. I'm not gonna lie, when I'm talking, I'm kind of nervous because this is my first time doing this. I will hopefully get used to this and be more calm when I'm talking. So I apologize if it sounds really weird. I hope you guys stay along, and we're gonna be we're gonna follow along with the episode. Next week, the next episode will be episode 2. So season 1, episode 2 of the Cosby Show. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Leave a 5-star review for me so that way people could see this podcast, as this is a new podcast, so I'm trying to get more traction, I guess, onto the show. I have a question for you guys based on this episode, which is, growing up, did you feel like you had to be successful in school due to the pressure of your parents being successful? So if your parents were, also doctors and lawyers, or, engineers and stuff, did you feel like you had the pressure? For me, I did. I do come from an immigrant family where, I have more advantage compared to what my parents had. And I definitely felt like the pressure was on, that I needed to do way better. So that's for sure. So I want to hear from you guys. So definitely leave, a 5-star rating, subscribe to this podcast, and I will talk to you guys on the next episode.